Amazing. So if we move on to the next speaker, 'cause I'm wary of time, and I definitely want to get to a few questions at the end. Oonagh, are you okay to go next? Introduce.
Yep, sure. I'm Oonagh. I'm here from the Freedom Law Project, which is, it's funny to be speaking on behalf of the project because we're kind of still in the process of setting it up, so it doesn't quite exist yet. But the aim of the Freedom Law Project is to essentially build a network of lawyers who are able to support individuals and groups resisting state violence in the criminal justice system, in the immigration system, and the psychiatric system. So this would involve things like providing advice and casework for individuals who are facing issues within these systems, providing advice for campaigns and on organising strategy, and helping to produce accessible legal information and resources for individuals and for organising groups. So that's kind of what we're trying to do with the project. We're aiming to be, I guess, a bit of a matchmaker service for grassroots groups resisting state violence and lawyers who can offer support to them. In terms of the kind of question of this panel of using the master's tools to achieve abolitionist goals, I'm going to talk about this from the perspective of being a member of another group, the Prisoner Solidarity Network, and our kind of work that we've done there, and where we found that we really need that legal support. So the Prisoner Solidarity Network aims to support people who are held in prison to resist the prison system. And I guess if you take our kind of theory of change, it would be to build enough collective organisation within people in prison for them to be able to significantly disrupt the system to the point where they can make demands about the conditions and about changes. I want to emphasize that we're very far off that aim. We have a very small number of members, and we're kind of, and the attempt to build collective resistance is extremely difficult within the prison system. And often people engage with the Prisoner Solidarity Network at the point of needing support with an individual problem. So something like access to healthcare, perhaps wanting to be transferred to another prison to be closer to family, perhaps needing support in a parole hearing, or perhaps having experienced violence from prison officers. So people will engage with us often at this individual level of a case, but something that's representative of a systemic issue. And what we're finding is that we really need to be able to support on this individual level to provide people with a kind of level of support, of safety and of confidence to then move towards resistance and move towards organising. And legal support is a huge part of that. And what we found through working with one particular lawyer, Kishal Sood, who I'd encourage you to follow on Twitter, is that often there's actually more kind of room within the law for challenging the system than lawyers will always necessarily take advantage of. So if you start from the point of view of thinking about safety as something that is collectively constructed as a society, and also harm as something that is socially produced, then you can move away from this idea of kind of individual risk of harm being produced by kind of inherent individual characteristics that need to be changed. And also if we start from the point of view of as prison as an inherently harmful institution, that kind of can bring a completely different approach within these legal processes within prison. So whether it's dealing with a disciplinary process that someone's up against within prison, or perhaps a parole board hearing, when we have lawyers who are willing to challenge the idea that perhaps if you experience homelessness with a child, this ups as a child, this ups your kind of risk levels, or the idea that just because you've at one point defied prison rules, it means that you're going to be a danger to people in the public. When we have lawyers who are willing and able to challenge that fundamental logic, we've found that that's not only effective but very empowering to the individuals that are being represented by those lawyers. So that's something, that kind of individual case support, although it doesn't always necessarily feel political is something that we're really, really in need of in terms of our organising. The levels of repercussions for prisoners who are resisting the system in any way or making any steps towards collective organisation are extremely severe. We regularly find that people that we're in touch with who are trying to resist even just individual things that are happening to them experience things like violence from prison officers, perhaps being transferred to a prison really, really far away from their family. They experience solitary confinement. They experience having extra time added to their sentence or having their parole denied. And this makes organising obviously incredibly challenging because the levels of risk are just so extreme. So I guess the way that we see law in our work is that we really need to provide as many networks of support as possible to the people that need to be at the forefront of the resistance, which is people in prison, and it's their families and their friends. So we see law as a way to provide protection and confidence for those people in as many avenues as possible. And that will give us the kind of groundwork to be able to organise further. So it's quite short, but I'll stop there, and I'm going to put a link in the chat to the Freedom Law Project outline and a form that you can fill in if you'd like to get involved.
Amazing, thanks so much, Oonagh. That's really helpful. And yeah, I think definitely support the Freedom Law Project. There are also other things that Oonagh is involved in, like the Prison Solidarity Network and also the Lockdown podcast, which is amazing. So I would highly recommend. But I think I think again, this is an example of where like individual casework it remains critical. I think in our work, like especially in the UK here, because that's where I'm based. The individual casework is where we can try and ensure that at least individuals are able to challenge what's happening to them. But yeah, it's about like how that fits within a wider frame as well. Like how do we make sure that it's not just lawyers who know how to articulate this? How do we make sure that movement builders and organisers also understand, yeah, exactly those principles that you need to level against government, the state. But I guess like one thing I would also say, sorry, just to ramble on a second before I move to the next speaker. I also think it's important that we are looking at the ways in which terms are defined. So yeah, as you say, the idea of risk, public safety, what the public actually wants is this. This is often asserted by the state, and for the most part, lawyers are tasked with just sticking to what they're saying. For example, saying that risk is increased by someone who has a criminal conviction of over 12 months, for example, with a conviction of a sentence of 12 months. They are a risk to the public. That's actually quite difficult. And it's quite important, I think, to understand how that perpetuates the system as it stands. And yeah, I think that's like another conversation that would be quite interesting to have.